for our new CBOs. I'm pleased to see that we have some of our existing CBOs on the call. And it's always good to have a little refresher. And so I think I'll keep the lines open unless unless I hear background noise, and I'll just try to mute any background noise that I hear. And if you are not able to speak right now, you can just pose questions. You can either raise your hand using the GoToWebinar app, and I will try to keep an eye on that. And if I see someone raise their hand, I will unmute you so you can ask your question. Or you can pose your questions through the chat or the questions function. And I just sent a couple of chats to everyone, so let me know if you didn't get those. If you go in the chat section, there's a bunch of links that I sent around, which I thought would be useful for everyone to have bookmarked, to some helpful resources on MLTC and Medicaid redesign. So why don't we just start by going around and introducing ourselves? Since we have some different folks on today than who was on yesterday. So I'm David Silva, the program director of ICAN. And who do we have from Action for Older Persons?
Hi, I'm Cassandra Hamilton. I'm the executive director here at AOP.
And I'm Courtney Cashman. I'm currently the HICAP director or program coordinator at AOP, and I'm going to transition to the ICAN program coordinator here.
And I think we have someone from ACR Health. Who's on from ACR Health?
Yes, hi, I'm Angela Matthews. I am an MLTC ombudsman.
Great. Anyone else from ACR?
No, just me.
All right. And who do we have from Sydney?
Sorry, Greg Otten from Sydney.
Hi, Greg.
Hi.
Scott, are you on? I saw Scott Greenblatt. So, Scott, are you on?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, okay, great. And
I should be in his office as well.
I'm sorry, who?
The other ICAN person at WDOM, Scott Barber Weiser, he should be on the call as well. But I'm recording this for him just in case.
Oh, okay, great. And these are all being recorded, by the way, so I will send around the recordings once they're posted. So if you have any other staff who couldn't make it, you can share it with them.
Great.
All right, and then do we have anyone from Empire Justice?
This is Muriel from Empire Justice.
Hi, Muriel. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Welcome on board.
Thank you.
And then do we have anyone from Nassau Suffolk Law Services?
Yes, David, it's Denise Snow, and we have
Ashley Omobodere.
Hello.
Hi.
And do we have anyone from Legal Aid Society? Legal Aid? Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. Laura, looks like your audio isn't working. I think Laura, if you want to be able to ask questions, you have to enter this audio pin. I just asked the system to resend your audio pin. I'm not exactly sure what it does. Maybe it pops up a little message or something in the application. But we have Laura Chamberlain from Legal Aid Society, and Christine Roberts. I think you're in the same boat. And Christine, you're with I'm not sure what organization you're with. So if you can get your audio pin entered so that you can introduce yourself. Let's see who else. Oh, from SAIL. Who do we have joining us from SAIL?
Hannah, Jocelyn, and Shirley are all on Shirley's call.
Okay. Great.
And I believe Rachel's dialing in from the other office.
Yes, I'm here.
Great. And you guys were going to be working with a legal services organization as part of your work with ICAN, right?
Yeah, that's the legal aid person who you can't right now, I'm assuming.
Oh, okay. That's Christine Roberts
In Plattsburgh.
in Plattsburgh. What's I forgot. What's the name of the organization she's with?
Legal aid?
It's Legal Aid of
New York. Northeastern New York.
Okay, great. Well, welcome, Christine. I'm sorry that you are mute at the moment, but if you if you can't figure out the audio, that's fine. You can always type in your questions. And did I miss anybody? No? All right, great. So let's forge ahead. So on the agenda for today, first we're going to talk about MLTC and mainstream Medicaid managed care. And after that, we will move on to the recent rule change that makes managed care mandatory for nursing home residents. And that could be either MLTC or mainstream managed care. And then the last hour will be about FIDA, and that will just be for my friends in Nassau and Suffolk counties, and Westchester, and for the existing subcontractors who are doing work downstate, you can stay on too. But all of you lucky upstaters get to jump off the call at 4 because FIDA does not yet apply to you. So, of course, you're welcome to stay if you're morbidly curious. Okay. All right. My other Scott is in the house. Hi, Scott Barber Weiser. I just unmuted you.
Thank you.
Welcome to ICAN.
Thanks.
All right. So he's with Westchester Disabled on the Move, making things very confusing for us that there are 3 Scots there, and 2 of them are working on ICAN. So I hope you guys don't mind if we start referring to you by your last names. It's not
Works
not
for me.
Formality. All right.
Works for me.
So we already went over, and yesterday we went through a lot of just ICAN policy and procedure stuff. So we can skip through all of that and fast forward. Here we go, to managed long-term care. So this, I apologize if some of this is review for some of you, and please just speak up if you have any questions or you want to clarify something. Like I said, I've got the lines open. So there have been hundreds and hundreds of different changes made in the New York State Medicaid program in the last few years, mostly stemming from the governor's Medicaid redesign initiative, also from federal health reform, and these are sort of the biggies that affect our clientele, the population of older adults and people with disabilities who need long-term care services. So the first 2 changes are about duals. So people who have Medicare and full Medicaid, and who need long-term care. Not all duals need long-term care, obviously, but these 2 policy changes only affect the duals who do need long-term care. So the first one is mandatory managed long-term care. So as you probably know, MLTC has been around as a voluntary program since the late 90s. And its availability has been limited in most parts of the state. But there has been, a sort of adequate presence of MLTC plans in certain counties for quite some time. There have been other types of programs such as PACE or MAP. And the change was that in 2012, MLTC was made mandatory for certain populations. And that's been phased in over the last few years. And now we're reaching the point where we're really within spitting distance of it being statewide. So that's the biggest of these initiatives that we're going to talk about. It really represents a sea change in how people access long-term care services, going from the old system into MLTC. And it's not optional. It's completely mandatory. If you're subject to this change and you don't enroll in an MLTC plan, the state will pick one for you essentially at random. So it behooves us to really help people get in the right plan for them. The second initiative is FIDA, which only affects New York City, Long Island, and Westchester. And this is building on the MLTC initiative and taking basically the same population, people who are already in MLTC plans, who have Medicare, and passively enrolling them into FIDA unless they opt out before a certain date. And FIDA is similar to Medicaid Advantage Plus or PACE in that it's a special type of MLTC plan that includes Medicare benefits. Most MLTC plans do not, and we'll get more detail on that in a minute. So that is taking place right now. Whereas mandatory MLTC in some counties, including New York City, MLTC has been mandatory for years now. But there are other counties that are just now starting to go online, or just recently going online with mandatory MLTC. So we'll try to share with you the lessons from the experiences we had in 2012 and 2013 if you're in a region where MLTC is just becoming mandatory. But FIDA is not going to affect most of you because it's just New York. Right now, it's actually just New York City and Nassau. They've put the brakes on Suffolk and Westchester indefinitely. So you're not, FIDA plans are not even allowed to do any marketing or take any voluntary enrollments in Suffolk and Westchester until further notice. All right, the third big change, and this is not so recent anymore, but this is affecting Medicaid onlys. So unlike the first two, which are duals, this is people who don't have Medicare, who just have Medicaid. And that population has, for a very long time, been required to enroll in a mainstream Medicaid managed care plan in order to get their Medicaid benefits. So, contrast that with the duals. Being on Medicare excludes you from Medicaid managed care. So dual eligibles are sort of the last bastion of people who could have straight Medicaid, could have just straight fee-for-service Medicaid. And so it's a big deal for them suddenly to be told, well, now you have to join a managed care plan, whether that's MLTC or FIDA. But for people with Medicaid only, this has been the norm for quite some time, and it caused a lot of problems back when that policy began, taking this vulnerable population and moving them into managed care plans. But that's sort of old news. The recent development has been removing some of the remaining exemptions and exclusions for that population and carving in the services that were carved out. So this was actually one of the initiatives under Medicaid redesign. I'm just going to switch over to my browser here to show you from the Department of Health website. This is one of the links that I sent around. This is MRT 1458. And this is the MRT proposal that was about basically requiring more and more groups to join mainstream managed care and carving in more and more benefits. So up here you see the transition of certain benefits that were previously carved out, personal care services being a big one. So since August 1st of 2011, if you're a Medicaid only and you're in one of those mainstream plans, that's how you get your home care. If you need home care, you have to go to your plan for it. It used to be that that would be carved out and you would use fee-for-service Medicaid for that. And it would be a prior approval service for your local Department of Social Services. So when a county, when that ended, that means that if you're a Medicaid-only person and you start needing home care, you don't go to your county DSS. You go to the plan. And you can see there have been a lot of other benefits that are carved in. Dental, orthodontia, consumer-directed, Lombardi, adult day health care, hospice, and then here are the transitions of different populations. So homeless people had to join mainstream plans. That was no longer an exclusion. And now we're seeing this, the nursing home population, people who are residing in nursing homes permanently are required to stay in their mainstream managed care plan. So this is a good site to have bookmarks, just as they do update this occasionally. And there's some useful guidance here, which we'll give some more detail on later. The mandatory MLTC initiative is MRT 90. And this is, again, definitely bookmark this page. Has a ton of information on it. All of the MLTC policy documents are here. I mean, this is the guidance that really governs that program. It's sort of a strange time in practicing, you know, for those of us who practice law, that you know, there's no statute or regulation that you're going to find yourself citing when you're working on these MLTC cases. Often as not, you're citing a PowerPoint presentation that was posted on the DOH website. So this is where you find them. And then, of course, the fourth big change is there's different ways of framing it. You could say nursing home being carved into the managed care package, or you could say nursing home residents are no longer exempt from managed care. And this affects both duals and people with Medicaid only. So if you are a dual eligible and you're in a nursing home, you have to enroll in an MLTC plan for Medicaid to pay for that nursing home stay. And if you're already in an MLTC plan, you have to stay in it. It used to be you could disenroll and go back to straight Medicaid to pay for the nursing home stay. Not anymore. If you're a Medicaid only, it used to be that you would be automatically disenrolled from your plan after a certain period of time, and you'd revert back to fee-for-service Medicaid. And again, that's not going to be the case any longer. You will just stay in your mainstream plan, and they're expected to pay for the nursing home care. So this is in the midst of being phased in. So that's been the law of the land in New York City since February 1st. Long Island and Westchester are supposedly going to start April 2015, and the rest of the state July 2015. Any questions so far? All right. So the next couple slides are just trying to break down a little bit. I mean, it's so complicated because you have two different major public programs that have all these different types of plans that you could get between the two programs. some of them are mandatory for different groups, and some of them are voluntary for different groups. And they all cover different things. So we've tried to come up with this. I have to give credit to New York Legal Assistance Group. My former boss and my mentor, Valerie Bogart, had created most of these slides. I made probably slightly less than half of them. And this was a way that one of the ways we were trying to just illustrate the different types of plans. So if the client is Medicare only, right, then managed care is voluntary for them, right? Nobody with Medicare is ever required to enroll in a managed care plan for their Medicare benefits. Okay, so Medicare has a managed care version called Medicare Advantage, but it's not mandatory for anyone. It is purely optional, and you have a choice. You can either get original Medicare, the fee-for-service option, in which case you might want to supplement it. You might have, well, you probably are going to have a Part D plan, and you might have a Medigap plan. Or maybe you have some other kind of health insurance like retiree coverage that some people still have. And that's kind of the default, is to have just original Medicare. But many people, in fact, apparently something like 35% of duals in New York State are actually in Medicare Advantage plans. And I think the explanation for that is really a combination of marketing, and that there are a lot of duals who have trouble affording the out-of-pocket costs of original Medicare, and maybe can't afford a Medigap policy to supplement their original Medicare. So you end up, even though someone has Medicaid and you'd think that they could use Medicaid as secondary, Medicaid is an inconsistent secondary health insurance. Because if you're a person with Medicare, you might have a lot of providers who just take Medicare and don't take Medicaid. So you might find yourself still having to pay the 20% co-insurance when you go to the doctor and things like that. So Medicare Advantage plans are pretty popular among that population, because instead of 20%, you might pay nothing to see your primary, or you might just pay $20. There are a lot of perks included with Medicare Advantage. Sometimes they have a gym membership. Sometimes they have an over-the-counter card that you can use to buy things like toilet paper and toothpaste. So for low-income Medicare beneficiaries, this is very attractive. Another thing is you get free Part D. The Medicare Advantage plan is usually free. You can usually find one with a zero premium, but Part D is almost always rolled into that. So if you were going to go this route and have a separate Part D plan, you'd have to pay maybe $15 to $50 a month for that Part D coverage. But if you enroll in a Medicare Advantage plan, you get it for free, and you don't have any need for a Medigap. Now, of course, the downside of being in Medicare Advantage is that you're limited to that plan's network. There are some Medicare Advantage plans that have open networks, like a PPO, but those are usually more expensive, and they're kind of the exception to the rule. So the Medicaid onlys, what about them? So these people, by the way, these Medicare only people are completely unaffected by any of the stuff we're talking about. Okay, nothing, nothing is changing for them, and they still have the same choices they did before. Medicaid onlys have the fewest choices. They have only one kind of insurance, Medicaid, and if you want Medicaid, you're going to get it through a mainstream managed care plan, unless you qualify for an exemption or an exclusion, of which there are very few remaining. So right now you've got about 5 million Medicaid recipients are in these plans. If you apply for Medicaid through New York State of Health, right, through the new exchange, that's what you're going to get. You're going to be in one of these plans. If you have SSI, you automatically get Medicaid in New York State, and this is the kind of Medicaid you're going to have. Some of the only exceptions are, or these are really exclusions, people who have, if you have a spend down, you're excluded from these plans. If you have Medicare, you're excluded from these plans. And if you're in one of these waiver programs, then you would be excluded. There are a few other exemptions and exclusions, but they're less and less common. So then lastly, we have our duals. And the duals are still voluntary for Medicare. Again, nobody, whether they have Medicaid or not, nobody is required to have a managed care plan for their Medicare benefits. But their Medicaid benefits are a different story. If you're a dual eligible who needs long-term care services, then you must enroll in MLTC, which would just affect your Medicaid long-term care benefits, not your Medicare. Oh, look, I have little health insurance cards. I forgot about that. All right, now how do I get all the yellow stuff off my screen? There we go. So duals who don't need home care, they are voluntary. They're not required to enroll in any kind of managed care. So if you have Medicare and Medicaid and you don't need any sort of long-term care services, most of the time you're going to have Medicare, you're going to have original Medicare, and you're going to have fee-for-service Medicaid. All right? So this is the sort of the last bastion of total fee-for-service insurance. Now, you may voluntarily enroll in something called a Medicaid Advantage plan, which is honestly a little bit goofy if you ask me, but the idea is it's a Medicare Advantage plan combined with Medicaid, with like a Medicaid managed care plan. And it covers most Medicare and Medicaid services, but it does not cover long-term care. So if you need long-term home care or adult daycare or nursing home or anything like that, then you're not going to be able to get it through a Medicaid Advantage. It's very confusing because Medicaid Advantage sounds a lot like Medicare Advantage, and one would think that Medicaid Advantage is analogous, that as Medicare Advantage is the managed care plan for Medicare, Medicaid Advantage would be a managed care plan for Medicaid. That's not quite right. Medicaid Advantage is both Medicare and Medicaid, one plan, but no long-term care. If you need long-term care, and you like the idea of having this integrated benefit, then you could get something called Medicaid Advantage Plus. All right, so that's Medicaid Advantage plus long-term care. Again, just a different way of illustrating the same concept of which benefits do you get through which types of plans. And one of the first challenges in doing this work is just diagnosing what kind of health insurance the client has. They have no idea, 9 times out of 10. And so it requires a little bit of detective work. It would be delightful if the health insurance cards that people got actually had the species of plan that it was written on the card, but that's not always true. So someone might be a member of, let's say, a Medicaid Advantage plan, but if you look at their health insurance card, that word doesn't appear anywhere on the card. It might just say that it's a special needs plan. It might look like a regular Medicare Advantage plan. So we'll talk a little bit later about some strategies for figuring that out. So if you're in MLTC, I think this is an important point. Notice how there's this big white space here for MLTC. When we use the term MLTC, most of the time we're talking about specifically the partially capitated MLTC plan. So this is a plan that doesn't include any Medicare benefits, and it doesn't include the medical part of Medicaid. It doesn't pay for doctors or hospitals or prescription drugs. It just pays for a subset of Medicaid covered services. And you can see the difference between that and these fully capitated plans at the bottom, MAP, PACE, and FIDA, which cut right across. They cover everything. So here's the MLTC benefit package in a nutshell. Mainly this is about home care. That's the main reason why people would enroll in MLTC. It's the main service that people get. It's usually personal care. And the services that, an important point to just make, these managed care plans are delivering state plan Medicaid services. So the same way that the service was defined under state law and regulations and under the state Medicaid plan, that's the service that this managed care plan is providing. It's not starting from scratch. We're not reinventing all of these services. So the service personal care is defined under the New York State regulations, Title 18, Section 505.14. That's the personal care reg. That still is the regulation that governs personal care, regardless of what kind of plan you're getting it through. So if you're in an MLTC, they have to provide that benefit to in the same amount, duration, and scope that it would have been provided under fee-for-service Medicaid. Okay? And the same thing goes for these other services, for consumer-directed personal assistance, for services provided through a CHA, like home health aid, and physical therapy, private duty nursing, adult daycare. Well, this is where things get complicated because there's two kinds of adult daycare. There's medical model and social model. So if it's a medical model adult daycare, that is a state Medicaid covered service. So if you just had straight Medicaid, you could get that. Social model adult day was never covered by Medicaid. So that's kind of an extra that you can get by enrolling in an MLTC, but you couldn't get before. It also includes things like PERS, which is the like life alert type system where you have a pendant where you can push a button to call, to basically place an emergency call. You have home delivered meals, congregate meals, medical equipment, supplies, prostheses, orthotics, hearing aids, eyeglasses, respiratory therapy, home modifications. Let's come back to that. In theory, it's covered. 4 medical specialties are weirdly included. So these don't seem to have anything to do with long-term care, but these are services that have either limited or no coverage under Medicare. So podiatry, audiology, dental, and optometry. So if you have a client who has a dentist that takes Medicaid and they are required to enroll in an MLTC plan, then they have to make sure that that dentist accepts their MLTC plan, or else they won't be able to see them anymore. Non-emergency medical transportation, so transportation to doctor's appointments, and nursing home care is included. So if you're in one of those partial cap MLTCs, which is what the majority of New Yorkers are in, then this is the package of services you get through them. Now you still have Medicaid, right? You're not waiving your Medicaid rights when you enroll in an MLTC. So the stuff that isn't listed here, the Medicaid covered services that aren't listed here, you get with your Medicaid card. You still have a little piece of fee-for-service Medicaid. So I like to think that when you enroll in MLTC, it's like you're having, like they're taking out some scissors and cutting a piece off of your Medicaid card. And they're giving you an MLTC card to replace it. But you still have half of your Medicaid card left over. So if you go to the doctor and your doctor takes Medicare and Medicaid, Medicare pays 80% and straight fee-for-service Medicaid pays 20%. Your doctor doesn't need to even know that you're in MLTC. Your doctor has no idea because the doctor will never bill your MLTC plan for anything. Same thing for hospital care, prescription drugs, behavioral health. Those are all carved out and would be straight fee-for-service Medicaid. Now, if you're in a fully capitated plan, the PACE, MAP, or FIDA, then your benefit package includes all of the stuff on this page plus everything else covered by Medicare or Medicaid. So those plans do implicate your doctors and hospitals. So this is an illustration of sort of a typical combination of health insurance that a dual eligible might have who needs long-term care services. So they've got their Medicare card, a Medicaid card, a Part D card, maybe they have a Medigap. You know, some people keep those Medigap plans even after they go on Medicaid. And then they have their MLTC plan. So it's a lot of different types of insurance that this person has in their life. I mean, the good news is that they can go to almost any doctor they want because they've got original Medicare. And if they have philosophical objections to managed care, they've managed to minimize their exposure to HMOs. They only have managed care for their long-term care services, and everything else is not. But the downside is they have to buy a bigger wallet to fit all these cards, and kind of keeping track of who's covering what when is not easy. Now, some duals have Medicare Advantage. They're not required to, but if they do, then that simplifies things a little bit. So they have a Medicare Advantage plan, which includes their prescription drugs in most cases, and they don't have a Medigap, and they would then have Medicaid to supplement Medicare Advantage plan, and they would have an MLTC plan for their long-term care services. And then the last combination is a fully capitated plan like Medicaid Advantage Plus. So this plan is one card. There's just one card that covers everything. And they don't have any separate Part D, and they still have Medicare and Medicaid, but they can basically leave those cards at home because they're never going to cover anything. They have to go within this plan's network for everything. So a big improvement in convenience, but if you're having troubles navigating that HMO plan, or if your preferred providers don't accept that insurance, then you might have problems. So at the top it says this is a Medicaid Advantage Plus, but this page would look exactly the same if we were talking about PACE or FIDA. It's the same model. And this alludes to that naming problem I was talking about earlier, that just identifying what kind of plan this is can be complicated because many plans do not name themselves Medicaid Advantage Plus or Medicaid Advantage. They might look like, from looking at their card, that it's just a dual SNP. So there are special types of Medicare Advantage plans that are just geared for certain populations, like people with Medicare and Medicaid, people in institutions, people with certain chronic conditions, and those are called special needs plans, and they get extra reimbursement from the federal government for catering to those more complex populations. But the funny thing about dual SNPs is that they don't necessarily include Medicaid benefits. So it's just a Medicare plan that says we are designed for people with Medicaid, but guess what? We don't have any Medicaid benefits. We're not getting paid by the state Medicaid program to cover your Medicaid benefits. We're just Medicare benefits. So, I mean, the nice thing about dual SNPs is they usually have no cost sharing. So if you have low-income duals who don't need long-term care services and they are struggling with out-of-pocket costs, and this could also be, by the way, people with just Medicare Savings Program, because when the federal government uses the term dual eligible, they include people with MSP. So if you have someone who's got, let's say, $1,200, $1,200 a month of monthly income, they would be over the Medicaid income limit, but they would qualify for a Medicare Savings Program. The federal government would consider that person a dual, and so they could enroll in one of these dual SNPs and have zero copayments for everything. I mean, the catch is they have to stay within that plan's network, but that might be a way to solve that problem for someone who's complaining about out-of-pocket costs. But where, your alternative would be, oh, do we get them on Medicaid with a pooled trust? That might be a more complicated solution. So dual SNPs are not, they're not all evil. Like, it might be good for some people. But the thing that really frustrates me is that some of those plans have contracts with the state and are Medicaid Advantage plans, or even Medicaid Advantage Plus plans, but not all of them. And figuring out which ones are which is tricky. All right, you guys still with me?
Yes.
All right, thank you. So I'm actually going to switch over to a presentation by the Department of Health. These are these presentations that they do every month for the plans, and we are usually able to get a hold of them through leaks. So I'm going to skip through the FIDA section, and this tells us the extent of MLTC enrollment as of February. So really amazing. I mean, over 117,000 people enrolled in MLTC in New York City, and we're up to over 21,000 in the rest of the state. So it's been spreading, and you can see here counties that are still not fully transitioned to mandatory MLTC. So I see a lot of counties in AOP's region. I see a lot of counties in sales region. So as those counties go online, you guys will have your hands full, advising consumers about this and what to expect. So Cattaraugus was approved. I think, let's see, Cattaraugus is in, I think they're in Lawneys. Yeah, they're in Lawneys area. And I'll talk some more about this conflict-free evaluation center later. So there are very few people left getting fee-for-service long-term care services. You can see less than 5,000 are remaining, and this includes personal care, housekeeping, Lombardi. So the vast majority of those folks have been moved over to MLTC. As with mainstream managed care, there are some exclusions. There's some people who can't enroll in MLTC even if they want to. So any of these waivers, the TBI waiver, the NHTD waiver, the OPWDD waiver, if you are already getting hospice care, then you cannot enroll in MLTC. If you're in a Medicaid assisted living program, kids, and then there's an acuity factor for eligibility. Not just anyone with Medicare and Medicaid can enroll in an MLTC. You have to have intensive enough needs to qualify. So if all you need is housekeeping, which is defined as 8 hours a week or fewer, then you cannot enroll in MLTC. Housekeeping is still a covered benefit under Medicaid, but you just can't get it through an MLTC. You would still get that fee-for-service through the local district. Social adult daycare, if that's the only thing you need, then you can't enroll in MLTC. Of course, because it's not covered by Medicaid, that means you can't get it at all. But that's how it works. Some people are exempt but not excluded, so they may enroll, but they're not required to, and that's really just age 18 to 21 who meet the nursing home level of care. So, I see a hand.
Yes, this is Angela Matthews.
Hey, Angela.
Yes. I was just wondering, what about clients who are in long-term behavioral health or addiction services, like inpatient?
Inpatient long-term behavioral health services. If they're otherwise, so they are on Medicare and Medicaid.
Yes.
But they don't need long-term care services.
Okay.
As defined here, like they don't need. I mean, we'll talk about what the trigger is, but they don't need personal care or CHA or nursing home placement because they're getting services in that residential facility, right?
Right, that would be correct. Yeah.
So I think that's why they would be.
So they wouldn't be required to.
That's right. They would be exempt.
Okay.
They would really be excluded, actually, because unless and until they started to need those services, they can't enroll in that kind of plan.
Okay.
Good question. You stumped me there for a minute, but so the I feel like there's a slide that's missing. Who is required to enroll in MLTC? What are the criteria that make it mandatory for someone to enroll in MLTC? And yeah, it's not in here. Oops. All right, so I will just tell you, and you can write it down. So the population that is required to enroll in MLTC is if you are in a mandatory county, that's factor number one. So most of the state is mandatory counties, but there are some that still aren't. The second factor is you have to have Medicare and Medicaid. And the third factor is you must require community-based long-term care services for more than 120 days in a calendar year. So that is an important sort of eligibility factor to unpack. As a practical matter, I don't think the 120 days thing is really enforced. I think that what they do is if you need community-based long-term care services, they pretty much assume that it's going to be 120 days for most of these services. So the question is, what are the triggers? Which services are defined as community-based long-term care? And they are personal care, and actually we can go back to this slide. Yeah, so this will maybe be helpful. So it's personal care, CDPAP, long-term CHA services, private duty nursing, medical model adult daycare, or Lombardi waiver. So those are the 6 trigger services. If you are in a mandatory county and you have Medicare and Medicaid and you're receiving one of those services on a fee-for-service basis, then you will be required to enroll in an MLTC plan. And if you don't pick one, then they're going to pick one for you. And your services will transition from fee-for-service to MLTC. So instead of the local district authorizing and paying for your personal care services or your CDPAP, this MLTC plan that you get enrolled in will have to start will take over responsibility for authorizing and paying for that service. So did everyone get that? Those are the triggers, those 6 triggers: personal care, consumer-directed, long-term home health care, private duty nursing, medical model adult day, and the Lombardi waiver. So now what about short-term CHA? So a lot of people with Medicare, let's say you have an injury, some broken bones, you have to go to the hospital, and then you get sent to short-term rehab to help you recover from your injury, and now you're ready to go home, but you need a little bit of home care just temporarily until you're back on your feet again. You would have a certified home health agency start a Medicare episode. They would bill Medicare for that. And if you had Medicaid also, Medicaid could supplement that. So Medicaid could provide, for example, more hours than what you could get under a Medicare episode. Medicaid could pay for those services for a longer time than Medicare would. And that would be fee-for-service. You don't have to enroll in an MLTC to get that CHA benefit. It's only the people who are going to be in a CHA for longer than 120 days. So that's where the 120, that's the one situation where I think you're actually going to see the 120 days factor in there. For all those other trigger services, there's no such thing as getting it for less than 120 days. That's just not how the state's interpreting it. So Lombardi was one of the trigger services. As many of you may know, Lombardi is another name for the long-term home health care program, which is one of the very first waivers. It's, I think, from the 70s, sometimes called the Nursing Home Without Walls program. And it's actually very similar to MLTC in terms of the benefit package and the concept that you have this whole range of different services that are coordinated in the person's home for someone who otherwise might be eligible for nursing home placement. So let's bring the services of the nursing home into the community instead of taking the person out of the community and putting them in a nursing home. So it's a very progressive idea, which the state has scrapped in favor of MLTC. So this policy basically spells the end of Lombardi. There's still a handful of people who are still in Lombardi because they are otherwise exempt or excluded from MLTC or mainstream managed care. But I think it's really all of the Lombardis with a had basically arranged to either become MLTC plans or subcontract with MLTC plans so that they could continue providing services to their participants. Okay, so what happens when you are in a mandatory county? So New York Medicaid Choice is the enrollment broker. So they are a private company that has a contract with the state of New York, and here's the New York Medicaid Choice website. So they're a private company that has the company is called Maximus, Maximus does a lot of sort of outsourcing of government healthcare functions for the state and federal government. So New York Medicaid Choice is responsible for handling this enrollment process for MLTC. They also do it for mainstream Medicaid. They do it for FIDA. And when you are in a county that has gone mandatory, if you're getting one of those trigger services and you're a dual, you will get a notice from New York Medicaid Choice telling you that you have 60 days to enroll in a plan, and if you don't enroll within 60 days, they will put you in a plan automatically. So the New York Medicaid Choice website has a little bit of information, not tons, but if you wanted to see, when they say long-term care plans, they're talking about MLTC, and it explains, who's required, who's eligible. 4 types of long-term care plans, so FIDA, PACE, Medicaid Advantage Plus, and MLTC. And it gives a little bit of education there. But the brochures and lists are probably the most useful. If we go down to long-term care plans, you can see here by region, they have lists of the plans available in each region. So here's Northeast region, and they use this little sort of color and shape legend. So for each plan, it tells you which counties are in their service area and their contact info. So this is what consumers will get. They'll get the letter from New York Medicaid Choice, and they'll have this pamphlet showing a list of all the plans that they can choose from in their area. And they can choose any of these plans. They don't have to choose one of these MLTCs. They could choose a MAP or a PACE if those are available. So they either voluntarily enroll during that period or they get auto-assigned. And the MLTC plan has to continue whatever services they were getting before for 90 days. All right, this is called a transition period. So that means that, let's say you were getting personal care services from a home care agency that worked with that county. Let's say it's called Agency A, and you were getting 8 hours a day, and now you are auto-assigned to an MLTC plan, and they don't contract with Agency A. Well, they have to keep paying Agency A to give you 8 hours a day for the first full 3 months, for the first 90 days. And after that, all bets are off. So they might say, well, we've reassessed you, and we don't think you should have been getting 8 hours a day. We think you only need 4 hours a day. And they can send you a notice of action that they're going to change your services on day 91. Or they can send it actually 10 days. They can send it day 80. They can send it 10 days before, and then you have advance notice, and you can request an appeal, and you would get aid continuing. But they become responsible, and their care plan becomes the governing instrument after 90 days. And they could also say, well, we don't want to do business with that agency, with Agency A. We have our own agencies that we contract with, and we were only continuing to cover Agency A as a courtesy, well, because it's legally required, during the 90-day transition period. So now you need to switch to a different agency. Now, the best situation is that you don't get auto-assigned. The best situation is that when people get these notices, that they call you, and that you can talk to them and say, well, which home care agency do you get services from? Which adult day program do you go to? Which dentist do you prefer? And then you can find out whether those providers are in the network of a particular MLTC plan and try to get them enrolled in a plan that will work with their current providers to sort of minimize the disruption for them. So any questions about that piece?
Hi, this is Hannah from SAIL. I just have a quick question.
Sure.
If you're enrolled in Medicaid with a spend down, you're not mandatory, you don't have to enroll in a managed care plan. Does it count for the MLTCs if you have a spend down? Are you going to be forced into one of those that way?
Great question. Having a spend down is not an exemption from MLTC. So you're right. If you're Medicaid only and you have a spend down, then you are excluded from mainstream Medicaid managed care. But if you are a dual in MLTC, then having a spend down is not an exemption or an exclusion. And you would have to pay your spend down to the plan. That's how it works.
Okay.
Yeah, great question.
Thank you. Thank you.
I actually have a question about that too. If you pay your spend down to the plan, it still works like to pay your spend down for your health insurance?
Yeah. If you what happens is if you enroll in MLTC and you have a spend down, the county puts up your Medicaid coverage for 12 months. And it's like you have full Medicaid without a spend down. So your Medicaid card, for the stuff that you can still use it for, your Medicaid card is still active from the first of every month. And you don't have to deal with, bringing medical bills to the DSS every month or anything. It's just on all the time. And because the state knows that the plan is going to send you a bill each month for the amount of your spend down. So it kind of converts the spend down into more of a premium. And that creates its own problems. I mean, a lot of people obviously can't afford to pay their spend down. And we can talk about some strategies to deal with that. But yeah, in theory, if the plan, let's say an MLTC plan gets paid $3,000 a month by the state for each one of their members, and they have a member with a $500 spend down, then it means that for that member, the state is only paying the plan $2,500 a month, and they're being shorted by $500 a month. So the plan is really going to be interested in getting that extra $500 from the member, and if the member cannot afford to pay, the plan is actually allowed to disenroll them for non-payment. That's something that we have seen very rarely until recently. And there's one plan in New York City that has begun to pursue involuntary disenrollment against members who aren't paying their spend down. So it's something to keep an eye out for. Any other questions about spend down?
Yeah, we have another question. What if someone already has their spend down through a pooled trust or something? How is that going to work? Do we have to set up through the trust for them to pay the insurance company? Or will they be exempt that way?
Great question. If you have a pooled trust, then technically it means you don't have a spend down anymore, or that, I mean, in theory, I mean, you could allow yourself to still have a spend down if you're in a pooled trust. You could maybe just use it to reduce your spend down. But what's supposed to happen, and I know there may be some variation from county to county on how counties are implementing pooled trusts, but the way it's supposed to happen is if you have a $500 spend down and you contribute $500 a month into a pooled income trust, then when your Medicaid budget gets done, that's a deduction from income that amount that you're contributing. It's not that you're meeting your spend down with the contribution to the pooled trust. It's that you're creating a deduction, the same way that your third-party health insurance premium is a deduction. So what the county should do, and I know that not all counties do this, is rebudget you with a zero spend down, because they're taking your gross income and subtracting $500, and that brings you below your $825. And so when you enroll in MLTC, the plan isn't getting shorted at all. They're getting paid the full capitation. They're not going to bill you. And as long as you continue getting your Medicaid recertified without a spend down, then that should just continue indefinitely.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, pooled trusts are really complicated for those of you know who've been doing them, and I think they're probably beyond the scope of ICAN in terms of actually doing a pooled trust for someone. But it is one of the tools that people have to deal with having a spend down in an MLTC plan, and so it's something that we are going to want to know about. And I think later we'll have at least a little bit of training on pooled trust, even if we're not going to be doing them, just so we at least know about them. Okay, so transition people, again, this is just for the counties that still have, that MLTC is not yet mandatory or is just now becoming mandatory. The strategy is really to get out ahead of the auto assignments. And if people are getting these notices, and actually this brings up a question that I need to follow up with the state on, which is, will ICAN's contact information be put on the mandatory MLTC notices from New York Medicaid Choice? And I do not know the answer to that. I hope that they are, but I'll find out. I'm just writing myself a note. So people will get the notice, and they'll have the list of plans there, and they can choose a plan, and if they don't, they'll be assigned one. And the notice will tell them what date. It'll tell them what date, and it'll tell them which plan. So they'll know kind of what their default is. But I really encourage people to investigate the plans ahead of time. Don't wait and just allow yourself to be auto-assigned. Find out. You can call your home care agency. Ask them, which MLTC plans do you guys work with? Call the dentist. Ask them, would you accept any of these plans? Which ones? If the person's in an adult day program, ask the adult day program, which plans do you take? And try to find, try to help that person enroll in a plan that will allow them to keep their providers beyond the 90 days. You can also ask the plan to come out and do an assessment. Let me know what you find when you try doing this. We had in New York City mixed results for transition folks in getting assessments before they transition over. There's no reason why you shouldn't be able to do that. I always think it's better to have a consensual relationship between the plan and the member than to have it be like a shotgun wedding where the state just randomly assigned them to a plan. I mean, you have some protections even if it is an auto assignment, but better that both parties are happy with the arrangement going into it. Now, what about new applicants? If you have someone who was not transitioning from fee-for-service but is just coming in through the front door, applying for Medicaid and trying to get long-term care services, what is the process like for them? Well, it is different. If you were applying for personal care services, there would be a medical form that you would have to use to you'd have to get your doctor to fill out this medical form and submit it to the DSS to get prior approval for personal care services, for example. That's not the way it works with MLTC. So the first thing you have to do, obviously, is just get approved for community Medicaid. All right, so yeah, Patricia had a question. Is it still possible to have the MLTC file the Medicaid application in the world of the conflict-free, whatever the E's stand for, the conflict-free center, we'll call it that. Yeah, I think if an MLTC plan wants to submit the application for you, then God bless them, and that's a great way to try to get help with that. But they're not required to. The plans are not required to help you apply for Medicaid. Many of them, maybe most of them, don't know anything about Medicaid, and I wouldn't trust them with a Medicaid application. But if you guys are helping, and you can maybe take a look at the application before it goes in, and then the plan is just going to sort of pass it off to their contacts in the local district, then I would say fine. That's probably not a bad thing. Having it go through the plan, and then the plan feels some responsibility for making sure that it gets processed. You have to do, obviously, the regular DOH 4220 Medicaid application plus the Supplement A. Make it clear that you want to enroll in MLTC, because what we've learned is the county needs to code your Medicaid case in a very particular way in order for you to be able to enroll in an MLTC plan after you've been approved, especially if you're going to have a spend down. There's a lot of variation, I think, from county to county in terms of how that's going to work. So, I'd love to hear your experiences with this. Let me know what you're being told by the workers in different counties, and we can always provide feedback to the state about how that's working or not working. In New York City, the coding problems are tremendous and have caused just untold misery, and there doesn't seem to be a great solution for it right now. So it's definitely one of the main issues on our agenda with the state, and we'll continue to be following up on that. Some other strategy tips here in terms of if you're doing a pooled trust. Married applicants have a great advantage. They can do spousal impoverishment budgeting, but you can't do it until after you enroll in the MLTC, unfortunately. So it's good that you get it, at all, but you can't get it at the point of application. So you might actually have to do a spousal refusal when you apply, and then after you get enrolled in the MLTC, you can ask the county to switch you over to spousal impoverishment budgeting. So what do you do if you have a spend down? The first choice is always get rid of the spend down. Having a spend down is a big extra expense for a household that probably can't afford it. I don't think it's possible in most parts of the state to actually survive on $825 a month. So that's basically what Medicaid is forcing you to do. All of your rent and food costs and utilities and clothes and everything has to come out of $825 a month. Because any income that you have in excess of that, you're just going to have to pay over to the MLTC plan. And many people have been able to just skate along and not pay that, and the MLTC plan is just sort of, they just eat it. But I get a sense that the winds are shifting, and so it's a scary situation for someone to be in, that, well, I'm accruing thousands of dollars of arrears to this health insurance company that may one day decide I'm not worth the trouble and just dump me. And it would be completely legal for them to do that. So coming up with alternatives is important. So there are only a couple of really great alternatives, and they don't apply to everyone. So the first one here is the Nursing Home Transition Shelter Allowance. So this is a relatively new policy. It's the only time that the New York State Medicaid program cares how much your rent is. If you have been in a nursing home for at least 30 days and Medicaid paid for any portion of the nursing home stay, and now you're being discharged back into the community and you'll be in an MLTC plan, then you will get an extra disregard in your Medicaid budget. And it's a regionally determined approximation of your shelter costs. So it's either your actual shelter costs or up to this cap. So in New York City, it's something like $1,000 a month. So imagine the client we were talking about before who had something like $1,300, $1,400 a month. They would have had a $500 spend down. But if they were in a nursing home and now they come home to the community in MLTC, they would have zero spend down because they get this $1,000 shelter allowance. So as long as their rent is more than $500, then they're golden. Nobody knows about this. So, the nursing home isn't going to bring it up. The MLTC plan isn't going to bring it up. We have to be, unfortunately, the ones to bring it up. Patricia asked a good question. Do they lose the shelter allowance at any point? No. It's permanent. Pretty amazing, right? I mean, I don't see anything in the guidance. I mean, there's a couple of different GISs. There's an ADM, I think, from like 2012 or 2013. There's an ADM, and there's been a couple of GISs updating the allowance numbers, and I don't remember seeing anything about it ever being like suspended. Courtney, did you have a question?
Yeah, Cassandra has one. Hold on.
Okay.
So does it matter what kind of housing they're in? Like if it's rental, if they own the home, is there any kind of restrictions on that whatsoever?
No. It can be their property taxes, mortgage,
okay,
insurance. Let me check. I'm going to check.
Okay, yeah, renting isn't quite as common here as I would say it probably is where you are, so we just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, good point.
Thank you.
So if you guys don't already know about the NY Health Act, it's another good thing to bookmark. It's a joint venture of 3 of our ICAN specialists, Empire Justice, Legal Aid, and ILAG. It is not an source of information, so ICAN takes no responsibility for any slanderous, but it is an awesome source of information. There's a lot of state directives and stuff like that that you might not be able to find elsewhere. Let's see. The search doesn't always work perfectly, so. Well, let's see. Here's the right form. All right, let's use this. This is a directive from New York City HRA, just informing they have to have a housing expense, and oh, here we go. 12 OHIP ADM 5. That's where your answer will be, Cassandra. So 12 OHIP ADM 5. And I will try to restrain myself from actually Googling that right now. but I will get back to the presentation so we can not run out of time, which I'm known for doing. So the, oh wait, were there any other questions? Sorry, I don't want to. Yeah, Patricia, we can follow up offline. But that 12 ADM5, well, oh heck, let's indulge my compulsiveness for a moment. So this is another site that maybe we should have bookmarked if you guys don't already. I'll throw that into the chat also. It's the Department of Health Library of Official Documents, and this is where they keep all their ADMs and GISs. And you can also find a lot of these on the Western New York Law Center site. But let's see, 2012 ADM, and there it is, 12 ADM5, Special Income Standard for Housing Expenses for Individuals Discharged from a Nursing Facility who enroll into the Managed Long-Term Care Program. So this will hopefully have the answer. Here we go. To be eligible for the Special Income Standard for housing, an individual must have a housing expense. This includes rent, a mortgage, or room and board. The individual may attest to the amount of the housing expense. Documentation of the amount or type of the expense is not required. Well, that's pretty nice. So I think you guys, with the homeowners, should be set. Because it's attestation, you don't even have to produce proof for it. Oh, Patricia's way ahead of me. Okay, you got it. So we'll forge ahead. There we go. Conflict-free eligibility and enrollment centers. This is another initiative. It started just last year, and not statewide yet. The concept here is that it used to be, and when MLTC rolled out in New York City, if you applied for Medicaid and you're approved, and you wanted to get MLTC, the next step of the process after your Medicaid application was approved is you would just call a plan and have a nurse from the plan come to your house and do a home visit, and they would be doing two things. They would be deciding how many hours they would give you and what kinds of services they thought you needed, but they were also making a delegated eligibility determination on behalf of the state. They were deciding, were you even eligible to enroll in MLTC? Because as you know, it's not enough to be eligible for Medicaid. There are many dual eligibles who are not eligible for MLTC because they don't need long-term care services. So begs the question, who's eligible for long-term care? It's a functional acuity question. What are your impairments? Do you really need another person to assist you with your activities of daily living? So it's really a question that needs to be a nurse to answer, and indeed the plan would send a nurse, and they would do an assessment. And we saw two different types of problems with this. One of them was the plans liked, for reasons you can imagine, the plans liked enrolling healthy seniors. So they would find people who were active, high mobility, healthy seniors, and then the nurse would go assess them, and they kind of had their thumb on the scale a little bit when we were doing the assessment, and they said, sure, you're eligible for MLTC enrollment, but it might be someone who really didn't any home care, and maybe all they wanted to do was go to a social adult day program and get some socialization and a free lunch. And the plan would provide that, but they're collecting $3,000 a month from the state. And the state is thinking that the person with really high needs, and in fact they're not. So that was one form of abuse that the state saw. And the other kind, which was the kind that we were more likely to complain about, was the plan comes in and assesses someone who needs 24-hour care. You know, someone who clearly needs assistance round the clock, maybe someone with dementia, someone with really profound needs, and the plan says, oh my God, we're only getting $3,000 a month state for this case. It's going to cost us $6,000 a month just for this person's home care. So they would try to deter those people from enrolling. We heard stories that, you know, plans would tell someone, well, we're not allowed to provide 24-hour care, or they would say, well, if you enroll with us, then your family member has to promise to provide half of the care, or you know, other things like that. So this kind of cherry picking was really pernicious and was widespread. And you know, thankfully, CMS insisted through a couple of different initiatives. The federal government insisted the state has to have conflict-free eligibility. And so they've done this by subcontracting with New York Medicaid Choice, and so it's a good thing and a bad thing. The good thing is there shouldn't be any more cherry picking. So if you're in a county where the conflict-free center is active, you don't call the plan after you get approved for Medicaid. You call New York Medicaid Choice, and in fact, you can do it before you've been approved for Medicaid. All right, you can do it while your Medicaid is pending, and they send a nurse. So New York Medicaid Choice sends a nurse. They do an assessment, and that assessment is to decide one thing only: whether you're eligible to enroll in MLTC. They're not deciding how many hours you get. They're not deciding what services you get. It's just, are you eligible or are you not? And once you've gotten a green light from the conflict-free entity, then any plan has to take you. All right? So you can see as of the end of January, the conflict-free center was operational in New York City and Suffolk, Nassau, and Westchester. On March 1st, it was rolled out in all of these counties, so including, I think, counties covered by some of us on the phone. This is what the activity has been like. So you can see 99%. This is not a real eligibility hurdle, okay? This is a rubber stamp. Everybody who needs home care and contacts conflict-free is getting approved. But what this is doing is it means that you have a hall pass once you've gone through this conflict-free thing, and no plan can turn you down. All right, so if you hear of situations where someone has been approved by New York Medicaid Choice and then the plan says, no, we're not going to take you, or tries to, you know, deter people, let us know, because that's not supposed to happen. Now, a plan could say that they formally disagree with New York Medicaid Choice's decision, and there's a dispute resolution process for that. I'm not sure if that's ever actually happened. But look, 10 times. I think there have only been 10 times where a plan went back to New York Medicaid Choice and said, no, we disagree. We don't think this person should have been determined eligible. And New York Medicaid Choice can say no, right? I mean, there is that 1% denial rate. So there have been 200 people out of the thousands that have been assessed. There were 200 where New York Medicaid Choice said, no, you're not even eligible for MLTC enrollment. You're too healthy. But those people get notice and hearing rights. So Yeah, so this was the rollout being phased in the other regions from March through May. Anytime that you have either New York Medicaid Choice or a plan doing an assessment of a consumer, you want to make sure that there's someone else there for the home visit, that there's a family member, or or we can be there. Just provides an extra protection, an extra safeguard, an extra source of information. These can be intimidating situations for consumers. Sometimes people are not good reporters of their needs. So I've had some clients who thought this was like the presidential physical fitness test, and the nurse comes in and is asking them about their needs, and they say, oh no, I don't need any help with anything. I'm as strong as an ox. I can run laps across my apartment, and we find out about this later, and it's like, that wasn't really the point. You were sort of supposed to sound a little more sick. So can we try that again? So better to have the family member there who, takes the nurse aside and says, listen, Dad is exaggerating. Trust me, this is what's really happening. They use a standardized assessment tool. It's something called the UAS-NY, Uniform Assessment System, and they put it into some, computer system where all the plans can see it. So once that assessment has been put in the system, it's there, and any plan that you contact will be able to pull that up and see that you were approved. Now the plan is going to have to do its own assessment. So even though you've been given the green light by New York Medicaid Choice, before you can enroll in an MLTC plan, that MLTC plan needs to do their own assessment and decide what services you get and how many hours. All right, so unfortunately it means having two home visits in hopefully a relatively short time. Now, there's no need, this M11Q thing, that's what they call the physician request form in New York City. And I think there's a state form that's been in use now for a couple of years, and some counties may have their own forms. But that was for the old personal care system. You don't need that for MLTC. There's no form, and there's no records that the doctor needs to provide. It's literally just the nurse making a home visit and assessing the prospective member. Now, if you happen to have a note from the doctor that makes the case for why the person needs a certain number of hours, there's no reason why you can't submit it, but it basically carries no weight at that stage. Maybe if you have a dispute with a plan over the number of hours, that might be an exhibit that you submit in support of your internal appeal or your fair hearing. But at the point of assessment, there isn't really anything the nurse would do with that other than file it away. So I think this tip, may make sense in some situations, but it may, I haven't found that to be a necessary step at the point of initial assessment, unless you if you know that you're going in for a fight, like if you know, okay, this client needs 24-hour care, and I'm in a county where nobody gets 24-hour care, then maybe you want to go in guns a-blazing and, have a doctor's note. Now, how do you pick a plan? This is something that people are going to ask you, and I have no idea what to tell you. You can find out which plans are in your county. In some counties, it may be eeny, meeny, miny, mo, right? I mean, where were we? We were at New York Medicaid Choice. We saw, okay, in the Northeast region, I mean, if you're in Otsego County, there's iCircle or there's VNS Choice. That's it. You got two plans. And that's all the state needs to have in order to make a county mandatory. They only have to give you a choice of two plans. So, over time, hopefully you guys will get some anecdotal evidence of, the quality of the different plans that are operating in your area. But even down in New York City, where we have 24 plans, I honestly don't know what to tell people, because we get lots of anecdotes, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. Like, for example, I have tons of horror stories about VNS Choice. And I was really inclined to steer clients away from them. And then I looked at their enrollment numbers, and I saw that they had a tremendous amount of market share relative to other plans. So statistically, I would expect to have more complaints about VNS Choice than I would about the other plans just because they had more members. So, I realized I'm not really in a position, I don't have empirical data comparing these plans, on standard measures, and so it's kind of hard to know what to tell people. There is some empirical data available. The state they do a report every 2 years for consumers that compares different quality measures about MLTC plans, and that's that may be somewhat useful. A lot of these plans aren't even going to be on that list because they're too new, but that's something that I can make sure to circulate so you guys at least have that. But in lieu of actually having sort of a collection of empirical data comparing all the different plans, the best plan for a consumer is the plan that will give them what they need. So just have the plan, come out and do a home visit and see what services they propose and how many hours they offer, and it's the consumer's choice. They may not have a lot of choices in certain counties, but if they don't like the offer they get from one plan, then shop around and have them call another plan and see what they're going to offer. And the plans that do a better job at meeting people's needs should be rewarded by getting more members. If you have feedback about good or bad experiences with different plans, by all means share those with everyone else. You can use the Google group for that purpose. I still haven't had a chance to sign everybody up for that, but I will. And that's a great forum for just sharing your experiences with different plans. Plans might try to pressure people to sign up right on the spot. And if someone wants to think it over or consult with a family member or someone, they have the right to do that. And I don't think anyone should enroll in an MLTC plan without getting a written plan of care first. You just want to have something in writing about, you promised me that you were going to give me X as a way to prevent any kind of bait and switch. Again, it's not generally possible for a plan to refuse to enroll someone. If you're coming in from the transition, if you're already receiving personal care services or one of those other long-term care services, and you are transitioned into MLTC, they can't refuse you. You're deemed eligible because you were getting the fee-for-service long-term care services. If you're a new applicant, if you're in a county that has conflict-free, then they can't refuse to enroll you either because you've been blessed by the conflict-free entity. But if you're in a county that doesn't have conflict-free yet, then you're in that situation that I described was the case in New York City 3 years ago. All right, so it's a little bit of the Wild West, and just be on the lookout for these kinds of pretexts that you might hear from plans when they're contacted by someone with high needs. I mean, the state has issued guidance prohibiting that sort of behavior. All right, so some comments about MLTC enrollment. First of all, there's no lock-in. So you can switch to a different plan at any time, and you're not locked into your current plan for any period. There's no open enrollment. So someone doesn't have to wait until a certain period to enroll in MLTC. You can enroll anytime you want, and you can switch anytime you want. The only thing you can't do is disenroll and go back to fee-for-service. There is a potential lag time of enrollments or any kind of enrollment transaction, whether it's an enrollment or disenrollment or switching plans. You have to do it by the 20th of the month if you want it to take effect the 1st of the next month. And you can never have any enrollment transaction take place mid-month. All enrollments happen 1st of the month. So this can create additional delay. As you can imagine, if you're a new applicant, you submit your Medicaid application. That could take up to 45 days before it gets approved by the district. You have to do the conflict-free process. That could take a week. Now, you can start that before you get a decision on the Medicaid, and I encourage you to do that. Wait until, maybe after you've waited a month since you submitted your Medicaid application, then call New York Medicaid Choice for the conflict-free assessment. So that can be running, at the same time as the Medicaid approval. And then once the Medicaid approval and the conflict-free approval have happened, then you get an MLTC plan in there as quickly as possible to do their assessment. And if everything works out right, hopefully you get an MLTC plan to agree to the enrollment, or that the member agrees, the client agrees to enroll in a particular plan before the 20th of the month, so you can get the 1st of the next month. But as you can see, it's almost impossible to get this done in 2 months. I mean, it's possible, but barely. So it's more like a 3-month turnaround, which is unfortunate. I mean, I think it's, I don't know, tell me what things were like in different counties. In New York City, under fee-for-service, we were getting typically 2 to 3 months before you could start getting home care services from the time you applied. Is that similar to what other counties were doing, or was it faster than that? Anybody? Like if someone applied for Medicaid and applied for personal care services, would they get a decision faster than 3 months? Well, it sounds like a long time to me. I'll leave it at that. Disenrollment, there are some reasons why a plan can involuntarily disenroll someone. We talked about disenrolling for non-payment of spend down. They can also disenroll if the member has behavior that is impairing the plan's ability to provide services to them or to someone else, or it could even be like conditions in the household. If they're family members or other members of the household who are creating an unsafe situation for the aides or something like that, then potentially they could disenroll a member for that reason. But it's there's a lot of strings attached to that. And actually, this is maybe as good a time as any to just show you where to find the model contract. So probably the most important piece of guidance with MLTC is the contract that the state has with the plans. So here we are at the MRT 90 page, and if we scroll down here after all the policy documents, here we have new model contracts. Well, they were new in 2013, but they're not new anymore. And here's the partial capitation contract. Remember, when we talk about MLTC, what we really mean is a partially capitated MLTC plan. So if we open this, here we have our managed long-term care contract. And let's go to Article 5. Obligations of the contractor. That's my favorite part, the obligations. So this talks about eligibility activities in mandatory counties, and then transitioning patients in mandatory counties, new patients in mandatory counties, non-mandatory counties, enrollment process, and then here we go, D, disenrollment policy and process. And it says here, reasons the contractor must initiate disenrollment, and a contractor may initiate an involuntary disenrollment if an enrollee or enrollee's family member or other person in the home engages in conduct or behavior that seriously impairs their ability to furnish services, provided they must have made and documented reasonable efforts to resolve the problems, and they may not request disenrollment because of an adverse change in the enrollee's health status or because of the enrollee's utilization of medical services, diminished mental capacity, or uncooperative or disruptive behavior resulting from his or her special needs. Right? So that's an important protection there for consumers, especially someone who maybe has dementia or mental health issues. Maybe they're a little bit difficult to serve, but that's not grounds for disenrollment. All right, so are there any questions about just MLTC in general? Or about
Questions
mainstream?
here.
Sorry, yep. Oh, none?
I said no questions here.
Okay. So a lot of the stuff that I've been talking about with MLTC also applies to mainstream Medicaid managed care plans that are providing long-term care services. So I think it's a relatively small population, but I don't want to give them short shrift. I would say that basically if you are a Medicaid only in a mainstream plan and you need one of those community-based long-term care services, it's like your mainstream plan becomes your MLTC plan. And in most relevant respects, it works exactly the same way. Okay? The services are defined the same way. The assessment process is almost the same, if not exactly the same. The the notice requirements are the same. I would just draw your attention for if you have Medicaid-only cases where personal care or CDPAP is at issue, there's this document here, Guidelines for the Provision of Personal Care Services in Medicaid Managed Care. And this is sort of like the Department of Health's cheat sheet for mainstream Medicaid plans on how to do personal care. So it includes references to all of the regulations and guidance and level 1, level 2, the criteria for 24-hour care. It talks about the assessment. It incorporates a lot of the important precedent, like the Mayor v. Wing decision, Rodriguez decision. So it just puts it all in one place. And this is kind of your manual if you're dealing with home care cases for Medicaid-onlys in those mainstream plans. All right, so now let's spend just a little bit of time talking about the nursing home business, and then we can let people go and torment Nassau and Suffolk with FIDA. So how did it work before with nursing home? If you were an MLTC, if you were a dual eligible who you were required to get MLTC in most counties to get your home care, and if you then were placed in a nursing home and you needed permanent placement, my experience was that usually these folks would voluntarily disenroll. Okay? Now, can anybody tell me why would you be able to voluntarily disenroll from your MLTC plan if you go into a nursing home? Because isn't MLTC mandatory?
Not in all counties.
Not in all counties, true. But let's say it's a county that it is mandatory. So you're getting home care in a mandatory county, and you're required to be an MLTC, and then you stop getting home care and you go into a nursing home. Why is it that you can disenroll at that point?
maybe you can, at that point, choose a different one, but it doesn't seem as if it would make sense that you could disenroll completely.
Right. Well, the answer was until recently, you could disenroll completely. And that's because MLTC was only mandatory for people who needed one of those 6 trigger services: personal care, consumer-directed, CHA, private duty nursing, adult day health care, or Lombardi. Nursing home ain't one of them. So if you don't need one of those 6 services anymore because you're in a nursing home, then MLTC is no longer mandatory for you. You don't have to disenroll. It's not that you would get involuntarily disenrolled, but you could voluntarily disenroll from the plan. And indeed, that's what often happened. And I think it's because the plan didn't like paying the nursing home, even though it was a covered benefit, because the plan's getting $3,000 a month and the nursing home costs $9,000 a month. So that's a no-brainer. They're losing money like crazy. The nursing home wasn't happy with the arrangement either, because they were used to getting $9,000 a month from Medicaid, and if you were in an MLTC plan, probably the plan was squeezing them on the rate, so they were getting less than $9,000. So the nursing home wasn't happy about it either. And as we know, nursing home residents tend to lose some autonomy in terms of making their own decisions, and that could be a function of incapacity, or it could be just outright fraud, that people are just changing their health insurance without it being consensual at all. I mean, I know that's pretty widespread. So it ended up being that these people would disenroll and go back into fee-for-service Medicaid, and the nursing home's happy. The plan gets this person off of their plate completely, and probably it doesn't make a difference to the member one way or the other. Medicaid-onlys were automatically disenrolled if they needed nursing home for more than 60 days. So that was automatic. They didn't even have the choice to stay in their plan after 60 days. But these are the things that are changing. So more and more people and more benefits are being put into managed care. And so beginning in February of this year, starting in New York City, dual eligibles are required to stay in their MLTC plans, or if they're not in one yet, they have to enroll in one if they want nursing home coverage. And Medicaid-onlys will be required to stay in their mainstream plan, or if they don't have one yet, to enroll in one in order to get nursing home coverage. So this affects anyone on Medicaid over age 21 who needs long-term placement in a nursing facility. And that's the definition, just to make sure we're clear about that, because maybe some people don't, right? This question of whether it's long-term or not is kind of making a bunch of assumptions about the person's condition. When it says requiring care and services which can be made available to them only through institutional facilities, there are not many of the services that people might need that couldn't be provided in the community. You know, most of the services that you would get, most of the care that you'd get in a nursing home is within the benefit package of MLTC. So this may be another lever for us to try to divert people from long-term nursing home stays. So there are 4 different categories of people that I'm going to break this down by to see, you know, how different people are affected. Grandfathered nursing home residents, MLTC members who are newly in permanent placement, mainstream members newly in permanent placement, and then new applicants for Medicaid, people who aren't even on Medicaid yet. So grandfathered, this policy grandfathers anybody who was already in permanent placement at the time of the effective date of this policy in their region. So if you live in New York City and you were already a permanent resident in a nursing home before February 1st, then you don't have to join any kind of managed care plan. You're just totally grandfathered, preserves the status quo, you can stay on fee-for-service. So For you guys upstate, the operative date will probably be July 1st, either April 1st or July 1st. So for people who are already in permanent status as of that date, there's no change for them. Now, on October 1st, these grandfathered residents will remain exempt from managed care, but they will no longer be excluded. See, they're excluded, at least on the mainstream side, currently, if they're grandfathered. It means that they can't even enroll in a plan if they want to. After October 1st, it'll be optional. They can enroll if they want, which means that the marketing to them will begin. So the second group is people who are, oh, let's see, there was a hand. Hi, Angela, you had a question? Oh, wait.
I'm sorry, it was an accident.
Oh, there you go. Oh, it was an accident that you raised your hand?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, cool. All right, put that hand down. So this is for MLTC members, people who are already members of an MLTC plan, who after the effective date for their region come to need a permanent placement in a nursing home. So let's say I've got a client who's in Amerigroup MLTC in New York City, and after February, she decides to become a permanent resident of a nursing home. She's supposed to choose a nursing home that accepts GuildNet MLTC. All right? And she can't disenroll from MLTC altogether and get Medicaid to pay for the nursing home stay. Now, in theory, the way this would work is GuildNet is in communication with her at every step of the way, and they're telling her about which homes are in their network, and she's going to pick a nursing home that they participate with. But that might not always happen. For example, if you have Medicare and you have a short-term rehab stay, so it's a skilled nursing facility, but they're being paid by Medicare, then Medicaid pays as secondary, right? So that copayment that you would have per day for days after the first 20 days on the Medicare Part A benefit, Medicaid picks that up. But if you're in an MLTC plan, your MLTC plan picks that up. They pay as secondary. And there's a policy that the MLTC plan will pay as secondary even if it's out of network. So even if that short-term rehab facility is not in the plan's network, they will still wrap around the Medicare coverage and pay as secondary. So it's entirely conceivable that an MLTC member might end up in a nursing home that doesn't participate with the MLTC plan. All right? But the state has made it clear that they don't want people being required to change nursing homes. So if my GuildNet member ends up in a nursing home that doesn't accept GuildNet, that member can just switch to a different plan that does work with that nursing home. All right? What about mainstream? If you're a Medicaid only and you're in a mainstream plan, then after 60 days, you get automatically disenrolled. So after this effective date, that's not going to happen anymore. So essentially, they're carving in long-term nursing home care into the benefit package for mainstream managed care. So if you need a permanent nursing home placement, you have to pick a nursing home that's in your plan's network, or else they're not going to pay for it. The good news is that lock-in is suspended for these folks. So if you have mainstream Medicaid managed care, ordinarily you do have lock-in. It's not like MLTC where you can switch whenever you want. If you're in a mainstream plan, you're usually locked in for a year. But if you are in a nursing home, that rule is suspended, and it means that you can switch plans to gain access to a preferred nursing home that's not in your current plan's network. Now, in both of these scenarios, whether you're a dual or a Medicaid only, you still have to get your Medicaid upgraded to institutional Medicaid in order for you to have Medicaid pay for the nursing home stay. They're paying for it through your plan, but they're still paying for it. So you have to do the 5-year look back. They have to look for any transfer penalties. All that still applies. All right, and then the last group is new applicants. So what if you don't have Medicaid yet? If you, I mean, this probably doesn't happen that often, but if you are just like maybe a Medicare recipient and then you suddenly need a permanent nursing home stay, you go into the nursing home, you're admitted, and you apply for institutional Medicaid. Once institutional Medicaid is approved, you have 60 days to pick a plan. So it behooves you to pick a plan that works with that nursing home. If you don't do anything, the New York Medicaid Choice will pick a plan that does work with that nursing home. And if you're a dual, they'll pick an MLTC. If you're Medicaid only, they'll pick a mainstream plan. But you just don't want to pick a plan that doesn't contract with the nursing home, because then you will have to move. That's the one situation under this policy where somebody would be expected to move, is if you voluntarily choose a plan that doesn't work with the facility that you're in. Now, prior to the managed care enrollment, the nursing home can bill Medicaid fee-for-service retroactively all the way back to the date of application, or beyond. Beyond. I mean, even retro before the date of application. So here's the phase-in schedule. So Long Island and Westchester, you guys are going live April 1st, tomorrow. I'm sure we're all ready for that, right? And then everybody else is supposedly going live July 1st. Now, the last time they postponed this, they told us through the MRT listserv. So if you didn't happen to subscribe to the MRT listserv, you never would have known about it. So the moral of this story is get yourself on the MRT listserv. Let's see, where's the MRT listserv? Oh wait, there it is. So here's the MRT, redesigning the Medicaid program, and here we go, sign up for the MRT listserv now. So you all can sign up for that. These days, almost everything on the MRT listserv is about DSRIP, which I don't know what it stands for, and I understand almost none of it. I've just been ignoring those emails, but every now and then there's something related to MLTC or FIDA, so pay attention to that. So how do we decide whether someone needs permanent placement in a nursing home? In theory, so you're in the nursing home, and the physician at the nursing home makes the decision about whether to recommend permanent placement. And then the plan that you're enrolled in, this is again for people who are already in a plan, the plan that you're enrolled in reviews the documents from the nursing home, and if they agree with it, then they issue a service authorization. And then the nursing home transmits a certain document to the LDSS to, I guess there's some conversion that has to happen of your Medicaid case. But remember that this is like any other service authorization from an MLTC or mainstream plan. A service authorization must be given in writing, and you have appeal rights. So, people should not be getting railroaded into nursing homes. If they get that notice and they disagree with it and they want to receive services in the community, they have appeal rights. And that's one major thing that we can be helping them with. This table just goes over the number of nursing homes in certain counties, and then the minimum network requirements. So the state says that every managed care plan has to contract with at least that number of nursing homes in the counties listed. So, you know, most counties in the state only the plan only has to contract with 2 nursing homes, unless there's only 1 in the county. And you know, you can see there's a lot of variation down here in New York City. I mean, we've got 55 nursing homes just in Queens. But a plan would be considered to have an adequate network if they only have 8 nursing homes in Queens. I don't know how helpful this provision will be, but I just want to put it out there that it's conceivable that you could force a plan to pay for an out-of-network nursing home if they have an insufficient number of nursing homes in their network or an insufficient number of nursing homes with available beds. Then you should be able to get the plan to cover an out-of-network facility. Obviously, this is more important to the nursing homes, but managed care plans are required to pay for the Medicaid fee-for-service rate to all nursing homes in their networks for 3 years after whatever the effective date is for that region. So let's say in Westchester and Long Island, it's from April 1st through March 2017. They could pay a different rate only if that plan and facility had already negotiated a different rate. I already talked about this. If there's a transfer penalty, then the plan is actually required to recoup the payments that they made to the facility, because they're paying during the pendency of institutional Medicaid. The plan is required to pay the fee-for-service rate, and if it turns out that the DSS comes back and says, well, you have a 10-month penalty period because of uncompensated transfers, then the plan actually has to take back the payments they made during the pendency of the application, which means that now the facility has a creditor claim against the resident. So obviously the facilities are not happy about that, but that's kind of how it works now. And you know, there are lawsuits. I see a hand. Courtney, did you have a question?
I did. So what if a resident goes into the nursing home private pay, and then like after years and years ends up going on Medicaid? Are they then required to get an MLTC plan? Because a lot of the plans in our county don't contract with a few of the more popular nursing homes. Would the resident be asked to move then?
If there's a nursing home that none of the plans contract with, then they would have to move. I think that's right.
Okay. Okay.
And,
thank you.
I mean, that clearly violates the intent of the state's policy.
Right.
But as many of us have pointed out, this policy has giant holes in it, and I mean, that's one of them. This is where it comes from, this thing here, this transition of nursing home, this Department of Health transition of nursing home benefit and population to managed care. It's on the DOH website. It's actually this, let's see, I think it was from this page. Yeah, 1458. And if we scroll all the way to the bottom, this is it. Draft transition of nursing home benefit and population into managed care policy paper. And there's actually, I see here some FAQs, some fairly recent FAQs. I'm not sure if I've even read this one. So that question may be answered somewhere in here.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe check these out and see if there's an answer somewhere in there. I mean, the state clearly thinks that this will work itself out because that nursing home in your county that currently doesn't contract with any MLTC plans, sure, they've got some private pay residents, but do you think they could survive without their Medicaid residents?
Probably not.
Right. So if all of their Medicaid residents are required to enroll in managed care plans, it creates tremendous economic pressure for that nursing home to come to the bargaining table with one of the managed care plans in their county and join their network. You know, because managed care will be the only game in town in the not too distant.
Right.
So it shouldn't be the case that there's a nursing home that doesn't contract with any plan. But today there is, and you know that for this resident that's a real problem. And I think if they've been a long-term resident and they're being asked to move, I think that's something that we should really do some advocacy on, because it clearly violates what the state put all this very kind of aspirational language in that guidance about nobody should ever have to move, but the devil's in the details, and for someone like that, it seems like they would be required to move.
Okay.
And it's not it's not something you can really appeal on the terms of the contract or that policy itself. It's more like something we have to bring that case to the state's attention. And get them to intervene, and maybe they just get one of the plans to pay out of network.
Mm-hmm.
All I can think of. But I mean, one question is, so that resident has been in permanent placement for quite some time. She's just not on Medicaid yet, right?
Yeah, this is kind of a hypothetical.
Okay.
Because we've noticed that one of the nursing homes in the area, we haven't found that they've been contracting with any of the plans.
Okay. Because it may be that she's grandfathered in. If you have clients who are private paying in a nursing home and have been doing that since before, in your case, July 1st, then that person, I would argue that person is grandfathered in and shouldn't be required to enroll in a plan. I just don't know whether the definition of permanent absence status here incorporates also being on Medicaid, or whether you could be considered a permanent resident even though you're not on Medicaid yet. And I think that may be kind of an open question. And I would argue that she should be grandfathered. All right, good question. All right, so here's some more links. We all love links. I emailed this around to everyone. If anybody didn't get it, let me know. And are there any other questions about mandatory managed care for nursing home residents? All right.
No.
All of my upstate people are hereby dismissed. Thank you for sticking around late. And if you're curious about FIDA, then you're welcome to stay. All right. 45 minutes of FIDA. I can do it. So, what is FIDA anyway? Fully Integrated Duals Advantage. It's a name that isn't terribly informative, but think of it like a Medicare Advantage plan with a smushed together with an MLTC. That's kind of what it's like. The basic bones of a FIDA plan are a Medicare Advantage plan. So you have, they're all HMOs. It's It's a closed, almost always a closed network. So you have to go to doctors, hospitals, pharmacies, etc., who accept that plan. And this plan gets paid a capitation by the the mechanics of it I'm not clear on, but essentially they get one check every month from Uncle Sam, and they get one check every month from Uncle Cuomo, and in return they give you, the member, all of the health insurance benefits that you're entitled to under both the Medicare and Medicaid programs. So this is like a giant umbrella policy that replaces all of the other health insurance you might have under both of those programs. So it replaces Medicare Advantage, Original Medicare, Part D, Medigap, MLTC. All of that is replaced with this one single plan with just a massive benefit package. So already it has that potential benefit of simplicity. But if you don't like HMOs, then this HMO has an awful lot of control over how you get your health insurance. So for someone who has all these different cards, now you just have one card. What does it cover? It covers everything. I mean that almost literally. There are so few services that exist in the universe that are not in the benefit package of FIDA that it's almost not an exaggeration to say it just covers everything and leave it at that. But anything that you can think of, including all the long-term care services, home care, nursing home care, and then even services under the waiver programs, under NHTD and TBI waivers. Those are all covered. So this is actually an expansion of benefits for people who might not otherwise be eligible. Like, let's say you have someone with a traumatic brain injury who's over 65, right? They're not eligible for the TBI waiver, but they can get those same services through a FIDA plan. Or someone who doesn't want to have to wait 6 months to a year to get approved for the nursing home transition and diversion waiver. They could get the same services through a FIDA plan. So what are the exceptions? What doesn't it cover? This is it. These are the 4 things it doesn't cover. Hospice, and these other 3 things. And basically, it doesn't mean that FIDA participants don't get these. It just means they're carved out. So if you're a member of a FIDA plan and you come to require hospice, you get it through straight Medicare. That's the one thing that you would still use your Medicare card for. And the same thing goes with Medicaid for these other services for, directly observed therapy for tuberculosis. Okay, so straight Medicaid pays for that. So who's eligible? It's basically the same population that is eligible for MLTC. You have to be over 21, you have to be on Medicare, you have to be on Medicaid, and you also have to live in the demonstration area. And then you have these sort of clinical criteria. You either have to be in a nursing home, eligible for the NHTD waiver, or you have to need community-based long-term services and supports for more than 120 days. So that last prong is really our MLTC people. So anyone who's in an MLTC or a MAP meets that prong, and they're eligible to enroll. And for new applicants, let's say you have someone who's just newly applied for Medicaid and they're looking for home care, they can go straight into FIDA, right? As long as they would get assessed by New York Medicaid Choice, the conflict-free entity, the same way as anyone else would. And once they get the green light from the conflict-free people, they could choose to enroll in a FIDA instead of going into MLTC. FIDA is not mandatory. So this is in the month of December, we got hundreds and hundreds of calls, and it was the same call over and over again because they got the announcement letter about FIDA, and they panicked, and they wanted to know, is this mandatory? Do I have to do this? And so you can calm everyone down and say, no, it's not mandatory. You have a choice whether to do FIDA or not. But most people who are eligible for FIDA have been identified for passive enrollment. So it means that the government is going to prospectively enroll you in a FIDA plan 2 months into the future, and you have 2 months to undo that by opting out if you don't want FIDA. But if you do nothing, you will become a member of that FIDA plan in 2 months. Right? So that is passive enrollment. Now, the majority of people who are subject to passive enrollment are already in MLTC plans, and they're going to be passively enrolled into a FIDA plan offered by the same company as their MLTC. So let's say I'm in the AmeriGroup MLTC plan. If I don't opt out, I'm going to be passively enrolled in the AmeriGroup FIDA. And that makes some sense because it means at least your long-term care services will remain undisturbed. You know, you should be able to keep the same home care agency, the same adult day program, the same transportation provider. All of that should stay the same. What FIDA represents, enrollment in FIDA represents for these people is not generally a change of their Medicaid, it's a change in their Medicare. It means that however they were getting their Medicare benefits before would change. So there are some MLTC plans that don't have a FIDA plan. These are the 4: Extended, HHH Choices, Montefiore, and United Healthcare. So if you're a member of one of those plans, you will be randomly assigned a FIDA plan from a different company. And it means you are going to lose your MLTC. Whereas if I was in AmeriGroup MLTC and I go into AmeriGroup FIDA, it's kind of like I'm still in AmeriGroup MLTC because they're going to keep the same hours, keep the same aid, the same agency, etc. But if I'm an extended MLTC and I enroll in FIDA, bye-bye extended, right? And there's no guarantee that things will carry over. Now, the state is, it's not completely random. The state is trying to, for these people, they're trying to identify a FIDA plan that at least works with the same home care agency. But I don't know how much of a guarantee that is. So this is one group of people that we want to sort of flag for intervention. If you're talking to clients and you have someone who says that they're in one of these MLTC plans, give them extra attention. Help them find, if they want FIDA, help them find a FIDA plan that's going to preserve their existing providers. Because if they do nothing, passive enrollment could potentially be a rude awakening for them. Now, anybody has the right to opt out of FIDA. So, you know, like I said, it's not mandatory, and you can opt out at any time before your passive enrollment date. So people will have different passive enrollment dates. Everybody's not going in on the same date. Now, the first wave of passive enrollments in New York State are happening tomorrow, April 1st. So if someone decided they didn't want FIDA, and their personal passive enrollment date was going to be April 1st, it would mean that after April 1st, it's too late for them to opt out, and they will become a member of that FIDA plan for April. Now, that doesn't mean that they're trapped in the FIDA plan. They can always disenroll because, again, FIDA is voluntary. So if they change their mind, you know, if they weren't paying attention and now they find out they're in a FIDA plan, they don't like it, they can disenroll, but it will take effect May 1st. If someone wants to opt out, then they can call Medicare or they can call New York Medicaid Choice, but really they should just call New York Medicaid Choice. I'm not sure that Medicare is actually opting people out, so I think it's better to just call New York Medicaid Choice because they're definitely doing it. The only way to opt out is by phone. You have to call that number, and if you have any clients who are literally incapable of opting out by phone and they don't have any family member or informal caregiver who's helping them who can do the phone call for them, let us know. It's an issue we've been monitoring. It's unfortunate there isn't an alternate way for people to opt out if they prefer. You just have to do it by phone. Within 1 to 2 weeks of opting out, they should get written confirmation by mail. And once you've opted out, it means you're never going to be passively enrolled in FIDA again. You can always change your mind. You can always voluntarily enroll after you opted out. You can voluntarily enroll before your passive enrollment date. So as soon as enrollment begins in your region, that is, so New York City and Nassau, voluntary enrollments began January 1st. That was the earliest that somebody could voluntarily enroll in FIDA. Suffolk and Westchester have been put on hold. They were supposed to start April 1st, but now they've been put on indefinite hold. As with MLTC, there's no lock-in or open enrollment, so people can disenroll or switch plans at any time, and it takes effect the first month. Unlike MLTC, FIDA participants can disenroll for any reason. They can go back to MLTC. There are only specific reasons why someone can be involuntarily disenrolled, and these are the reasons. Does anybody notice one of the reasons you can be disenrolled from MLTC that is missing from this list?
The spend down?
Bingo! That's right. You can't be disenrolled for non-payment of your spend down. So that's a very nice sort of hidden feature of FIDA, and we're sort of struggling with what's the right way to talk to people about this benefit.
Don't worry about your spend down.
Yeah, I mean, shirking legal debts is, not something that we want to be known for promoting. But if you have clients who are struggling with paying their spend down in MLTC and are actually at risk of being disenrolled, exhaust all of the other remedies, right? Exhaust the spousal impoverishment, the shelter allowance, pooled trust, negotiating with the plan. And if somebody isn't paying their full spend down, maybe they're just paying a little bit. Like we have a client who's paying like $25 a month. For a lot of plans, that's enough to mark the account as not in default, so they don't refer it for disenrollment or for collections. And maybe that you can hobble along like that for years, and that might be great. Well, it's not great, but it's adequate. I haven't ever heard of an MLTC plan pursuing a judgment against a member or a former member for unpaid spend down. It could happen. They have that legal recourse. But if somebody's in that situation and they're really in trouble, like the plan is making noises about disenrollment, or it's stressing them out a lot, what I would say is look at FIDA and see if there are other good reasons for them to enroll in FIDA. If there aren't, or if it looks like a bad idea, then forget it. I would never say that someone should enroll in FIDA just so they can more effectively stiff the plan on the spend down. I think it would be maybe an added perk if someone did seem appropriate for FIDA and they were nervous about the spend down. You can tell them, well, if you enroll in FIDA, you can't be disenrolled for non-payment of the spend down, and let them do with that information what they will. Now, it is still a legal debt, and the plan can still pursue, other collection tactics But like I said, we haven't ever seen MLTC plans do that. So I don't know whether we can expect that with FIDA or not. This disruptive behavior thing, really, it's going to be really hard for plans to do that. I don't think we're going to see a lot of that. I mean, they actually have to not only make real efforts to resolve it and lots of notices to the member, but they have to actually get approval. They have to get approval from DOH and CMS, from the federal government, for each individual member that they want to disenroll for disruptive behavior. So it's a very high hurdle, and I doubt that we're going to see plans trying to do that. So there are some people who are eligible to enroll in FIDA, but who will not be passively enrolled. So these people will get an announcement letter, or will have already gotten an announcement letter saying, hey, there's this thing called FIDA, aren't you interested in it? But they're not going to get the other letters that say, in 60 days, we're going to put you in this plan. And if they do nothing, they'll keep the status quo. So these are the opt-in people. And the biggest buckets under here are people who are enrolled in a PACE, right? So PACE folks are not going to be passively enrolled. Native Americans, people in health homes or ACOs, people with end-stage renal disease, or people in the NHTD waiver. So all those people might be eligible and might decide to voluntarily enroll in FIDA, but none of them will be passively enrolled. All right, these are the two regions. So region 2 is on hold. It says here April and July, but you can ignore that. It's going to be later than that. So these are the different notices that people can expect. The announcement letter, and then there's a 90-day letter, which says all the same stuff as the announcement letter. And then the first time that you get anything about passive enrollment is the 60-day. And that tells you which plan you're going to be passively enrolled into on 30 days. And then you get another one on 30 days. And this is the timing in Region 1. So not everybody is going to be passively enrolled on the same day. They will be phased in from April 1st through August 1st. And who knows, maybe even later. Maybe they might even decide to slow down Region 1 too. If you don't have SSI, then the way they determine your passive enrollment date is based on when your Medicaid case is up for reauthorization. So if let's say you're talking to a client and you say, well, when did you get your last Medicaid renewal? And they say, oh, I got it in like October. Then there's a pretty good chance that that person's Medicaid case expires in like December, something like that, because they usually send out the renewals pretty far in advance. So if that person has a December Medicaid renewal, then their passive enrollment date should be June 1st. And then that tells you when they would get the other notices. But the ultimate determinant will be when they actually get the notice. So if the client gets a notice that says your passive enrollment date is May 1st, then their passive enrollment date is May 1st. I mean, that's the best evidence of it. Because it's not sometimes not so easy to know when somebody's Medicaid case renews. If you're a Medicaid recipient who has SSI, then of course you don't have a Medicaid recert. And so it's your birthday, the month of your birthday, that determines when you're going to get the passive enrollment. Nursing home residents are also eligible for FIDA and subject to passive enrollment for FIDA. And according to this timeline, which again, these are subject to potential revision, but according to this timeline, nursing home residents who are new, again, FIDA, the grandfathering applies to FIDA too. If you were in permanent absence status before January, then this doesn't affect you. But if you're in permanent absence status after January, then you would be subject to potential passive enrollment August 1st. I think there's a very strong chance that's going to get postponed. I think there's a lot of concern with nursing home residents having potential mandatory enrollment in MLTC and potential passive enrollment in FIDA happening at basically the same time. It's going to be insanely confusing. So stay tuned on this. This was the original timeline for Region 2, but that's all bets are off now for Region 2. So why? Why FIDA? There is a significant body of research, and I think also just anecdote, that there are certain problems that happen because of having two different types of health insurance that are both fee-for-service, covering different aspects of a person's health care and not coordinating with each other in any meaningful way. In the Medicare, original Medicare system historically really promoted a real sort of piecework approach to practicing medicine, and I think a lot of Medicare beneficiaries feel that their doctors will just, order whatever tests for them they can get covered for and whatever procedures Medicare will pay for, and that there isn't a lot of coordination, and that Medicaid then comes in and now you have two different sort of relatively undiscriminating payers that a provider can play against each other in different ways. And I think from the government's perspective, it's obviously a cost problem. So they see either overutilization or inappropriate utilization, and that kind of gets them worried. But from a client's perspective, I have to say I've also seen real harm to clients because of this. An example would be, let's say you're getting home care that's covered by MLTC, and you have, I had a client like this she had pretty bad dementia. She was difficult to care for. She was getting 24-hour care, and the plan was getting nervous about this situation. Nothing had changed in her status. I mean, she did not have any sort of medical emergency. She didn't have any sudden deterioration of her condition, and she continued to be appropriate for personal care services under the regulation. But the plan was nervous about it, and so one day they told the home attendant, call 911 and get an ambulance to come and pick up the client and bring her to the hospital, and you're not to go with her. We're closing the case, right? And so the MLTC plan just washed their hands of this client, basically dumped her in a hospital for no reason. She was just sitting at her kitchen table, minding her own business. She wasn't having any kind of emergency. The EMT initially said, why am I here? There's nothing wrong with this lady. And the aide said, well, my boss told me to call you. You have to take her. Unfortunately, the son paid the aide to go with her client to the hospital and not abandon her there. But from the plan's perspective, there was no financial disincentive to them doing this because Medicare paid for the ambulance, Medicare paid for the ER, Medicare paid for the longer hospital stay that it ripened into while the plan was refusing to reinstate services. Medicare even paid for the skilled nursing facility stay after that. And all that time, the MLTC was collecting $3,500, $4,000 a month from the state and not providing a cent of services. And then when the client was ready to come home from the nursing home, they said, well, we're not taking you back because we don't think you're appropriate. And I always wonder, if Medicare was included in their benefit, would they have been so quick to call 911. So if that plan had to pay for the ambulance, and that plan had to pay for the hospital, and the plan had to pay for the nursing home, maybe they would have stopped for a moment and said, you know what, let's find a way to make this work in the community. Let's get a psychiatrist or a gerontologist in our network. Let's arrange for transportation to bring the patient to a psychiatrist to have a psych eval so we can have our concerns addressed about her dementia-related behaviors or whatever it was. But they didn't even think about doing that, even though it was within their power to do it. But if they actually covered psychiatry, and if they would have been the ones footing the bill for all these expensive services, then maybe things would have turned out differently. I don't know. In FIDA, obviously, you would just have one network. So you don't have to worry about, well, this doctor takes Medicare, but do they take Medicaid? You just have to worry about, do they take my FIDA plan? Now, it's a smaller network, so you can't go to any doctor who takes Medicare anymore. You have to go to a doctor who takes that particular FIDA plan, but at least there's only one network. You have this thing called the IDT. It stands for Interdisciplinary Team. So as you may know, everyone who's in MLTC has a care manager. And the care manager is responsible for assessing their needs and coordinating their care and authorizing any services that they require. But I think there's been a wide range of experiences with the care managers at MLTC plans in terms of how well they work out. And I'm wondering, I'd like to hear what those of you on the call, what your experiences are with care managers. I mean, I've had some cases where it really seems like they're just a gatekeeper, and they come to the client's house twice a year to reassess, and then the rest of the year they are hard to reach by phone. If you call them saying, oh, I need more supplies or I want increased services, they're not really helpful. Have other people had that experience too?
This is Denise. Yeah, I think it's really spotty. I mean, it can be good, but I don't have particularly good experiences either. So, and while we're on the subject here, just to back up a little bit.
Sure.
You had said the DSRIP, the delivery system redesign and incentivized payment plan, that really fits in kind of importantly with FIDA, or FIDA fits in with that, because one of the things that anybody who's participating in DSRIP should be aware of is community-based partners who are helping the individuals in the community to not use the institutionalized services, to not use the inpatient services. So I was really taken by what you said about the MLTCs being sort of incentivized to send their clients to the hospital. So it's pretty interesting how the play in all this stuff.
Yeah, and it's definitely something that I think I should be more knowledgeable about, but I've just been living in FIDA land so much that I haven't been able to, poke my head outside of the cave and see what DSRIP is all about.
No, but I
think that's right.
I think anyone
really
in DSRIP
moving.
would love you. So I mean, that's the thing. I think you'd be like key for their success. So that's why I'm saying that.
Yeah, I mean, and really it's us. I mean, ICAN. I think this is a good point. Like ICAN should become a participant in the DSRIP process in terms of the feedback that we're getting. This valuable information about what are we seeing in the community, in the real world, when people actually try to get discharged from nursing homes, or when people try to stay living in the community in spite of having different, complex needs, you're right, that's a valuable source of information. And I think once we take care of the basics of just like running the program, that's something that we've got to do for sure. The IDT is an attempt to address some of the potential shortcomings of the MLTC care management process. In my experience, the MLTC care management process is very top-down. The nurse, in consultation with their supervisors and the medical director, makes decisions about your service plan, and they're just dictated to you. And you, as a member, have almost no say in that process, and any expressions of discontent that you have are usually just kind of diverted. They're not, everything that you need, you have to go through that care manager. You have to call that phone number. And if you want to file an appeal, you might be discouraged from doing that, or you might be expressing dissatisfaction with something, and the care manager doesn't interpret it as you asking for an appeal. They interpret it as, oh, I thought you were just complaining. And so I think you really, now some plans do a great job with this. I mean, they're supposed to, if you read the model contract, there's a whole section in there about the care management function, and there's really a lot that they're supposed to be doing, and some plans really do it. I mean, they're even supposed to coordinate services that aren't part of the benefit package. Like they're supposed to be talking with your doctors, even though they're not paying for the doctor's visits. But with FIDA, it's a much, much stronger version of care management. You get a team that consists of you, the participant, and anybody else you designate, and of course the care manager from the plan, and your PCP, and certain other people. And that team makes decisions together. So it really gives the participant a seat at the table in deciding their own service plan. There are never any out-of-pocket costs in FIDA, except for your spend down. So if you had a spend down with your MLTC plan, then when you enroll in FIDA, you'll still have a spend down, and generally you'll have the same spend down. But there's no co-payments, there's no deductibles, not even for drugs. So remember, if you're dual eligible and you've got Part D, you're probably paying a few dollars for each prescription drug refill. It could be anywhere from $1 and change to $6 and change for each drug. And that's different from what it used to be for Medicaid recipients, where they used to pay, they used to just be able to pay nothing. And with Part D, they had to start paying these, granted, they're subsidized copays, but copays nonetheless. If you're in FIDA, you have 0 copays. So it's still, you're still getting Part D benefits through the FIDA plan, but the copayment level, the subsidy level just goes up. So you get the same subsidy level you would have if you were in a nursing home. If you're on Part D in a nursing home, you pay 0 for everything. Another potential advantage is access to these waiver services that otherwise you might not have access to. So, I mean, some of these are kind of theoretical. The benefit about cost shifting or the benefit around care management, those are kind of a tough sell for clients because it's very intangible to them. But what I've been trying to do is talk to clients about how they're finding their MLTC. And if someone complains to me that, oh, I'm always calling my care manager and they're never answering the phone, I tell them, well, this is how FIDA does it differently. And maybe that's actually solving a problem for you. It's not just a hypothetical benefit. But for some people, it isn't. Some people say, I'm happy with what I have now. If it ain't broke, I don't want to fix it. And I've got to agree with them. Change is fundamentally a bad thing after you reach a certain age. So I'm not, I don't think it's not our job to be, sales agents for FIDA. Our goal is let's find the people who would really benefit from it and make sure that they give it a fair chance and aren't deterred just because it's something new and different. But if we don't think it's going to be a benefit to somebody, it's our job, it's our duty to tell them, no, this is a bad idea for you. Like, you've been seeing the same cardiologist for 20 years and that person only takes Medicare. I don't think you should join FIDA. That you're going to lose that doctor. So that's kind of the main, in terms of the calls that we've been getting about FIDA so far, I think the main, well, the main reason why people would want to opt out has just been pure aversion to change. Just people saying, I don't care whether it's good or better or worse. You know, I've just barely gotten the hang of this MLTC business. I don't want to have a whole new change in my health insurance, no matter how great it is. That's sort of the first reason. But the second reason is the restriction of provider network. So almost all FIDA plans are just a closed network, HMO structure, and they have a provider directory, and that's the list of providers. And FIDA encompasses all of your providers, so it means you're only going to get coverage if you go to a doctor. You know, every single doctor that you might go to has to be in the plan's network, or else they're not going to pay for it. And you know, for a lot of these folks, you might have 10 different specialists you're going to. There's a very high chance that the typical dual eligibles providers that at least some of them are not participating in the FIDA plan. The one exception to this is GuildNet. GuildNet has a unique structure. They have a POS network. So it's kind of like a PPO. It means that you can actually go to any doctor who takes original Medicare, or any provider, not just doctors. You can go to any provider, any service that's covered by original Medicare. You can go to any provider who takes original Medicare, and GuildNet will pay that provider the full Medicare rate. Okay? So that's a big perk. Now, take it with a grain of salt, though, because this means that that provider has to be willing to see you now that you don't have original Medicare anymore, and that provider has to be willing to submit a claim to GuildNet FIDA. So it's great that GuildNet is willing to pay, but the doctor may not be willing to participate. So you go to your, you know, if you want to take advantage of this, it really behooves you to call the doctor's office and say, listen, you know, I may enroll in this plan, but they, you know, I know that you don't take it, but they will pay you the Medicare rate as long as you submit a claim to them. And some doctors, great, they'll say, yeah, that's fine. But some will say, no, there's a reason I'm not participating in managed care. I only know how to submit claims to Medicare. I'm not interested in submitting claims to anybody else. And that could be a real obstacle. Like any other Medicare Advantage plan, there's utilization management. You know, there will be prior approval for certain things. Now, again, 35% of dual eligibles in New York are already in Medicare Advantage. So if you're already in a Medicare Advantage plan, this isn't that different. If you're someone who's in Medicare Advantage and you have MLTC, you have two different HMOs responsible for different parts of your health care. And so I think those people are kind of low-hanging fruit for FIDA because they've already become accustomed to going through a network, they're already dealing with managed care, and they're suffering from a lack of coordination because they have these two different HMOs. You know, once you've gotten accustomed to working with an HMO, it doesn't make sense to have more than one. You might as well just have one overseeing everything, and then I think there would be some real benefits for that person. But for someone coming from original Medicare, it's a tougher sell because, again, this is the first time in that person's life that they have ever had to deal with a managed care network for their primary medical care. So it's a lot to bite off. So here's some more information about the IDT. We already talked about a lot of this. Who's who's on the IDT. They have to meet every 6 months. That could be in person or by phone. And they're supposed to reach decisions through consensus. And those decisions become binding service authorizations. And they have like a pretty strong authority. I mean, they could, your IDT, you could say to your IDT, listen, I really, it's really important to me to be able to go to church every Sunday, but I have trouble getting there, and I can't take public transportation. I love the van service that you guys use to bring me to my doctors. Is there any way that you can bring me to, my church service and pick me up? It's not a covered service, right? And that's just not a covered service under Medicaid or FIDA. But if the IDT decides to do it, then the plan has to pay for it, even if it's not covered. And they are allowed to factor in your preferences and your social circumstances and stuff like that. Now, whether they'll actually do it in practice is another story. But we should be encouraging them to, kind of think outside the box. There's a transition policy for FIDA, just as there is for MLTC. So the FIDA plan has to continue covering all of the same providers and all the same services that you're getting now for 90 days after enrollment. All right? So if you are in, let's say, Metro Plus MLTC, and you are passively enrolled in Metro Plus FIDA, and there was a doctor you were seeing under Original Medicare who doesn't take Metro Plus FIDA, Metro Plus FIDA has to continue paying that doctor for the first 90 days that you're in their plan. Now this, again, is sort of a one-way policy. It guarantees that Metro Plus has to make payment, but it doesn't guarantee that the provider has to keep seeing you. So it could be that your next appointment with the provider, even though it's in the transition period, the provider, takes one look at your health insurance and says, no, I'm not touching you because you have new insurance now and I don't take it. And you could say, but no, don't worry, Metro Plus has a transition policy. You'll be able to get paid anyway. Probably they're not going to believe you and they may not care. Most medical receptionists are, stout gatekeepers for their providers, and they're kicking anybody out who doesn't have the right insurance. So just take that with a grain of salt. Nobody wants to rely on the transition policy. What we've been trying to do is if someone expresses an interest in FIDA, we will find out up front which of their providers participate and which ones don't. And we will even connect those providers that don't participate with the FIDA plan. We'll send their information to provider liaisons that we've been given by the state so that the plan can reach out to that provider and see if they're willing to join the network.
Yeah.
Just trying to make it as smooth a transition as possible so that people don't have any unpleasant surprises after they're passively enrolled. The transition period for behavioral health care is longer than 90 days. It's for the entire duration of the episode of care, and that can be up to 2 years long. Unique among all of the duals demos in the country, New York's has a almost fully integrated appeals process. So it doesn't matter whether the service at issue is covered by Medicare or Medicaid. You get one notice and you have one appeals process. And you get aid continuing regardless of whether it's Medicaid or Medicare that would usually cover that service. So this is actually an expansion of aid continuing beyond what you can currently get aid continuing for. And that aid continuing will apply throughout the first 3 stages of appeal. So your first level of appeal, like MLTC, is an internal appeal with the plan. All right, so you have to exhaust that first. And then the interesting thing here is, let's say the plan denies the internal appeal. Well, you automatically get a fair hearing through this new integrated hearing office. And those ALJs will be able to hear disputes about any FIDA-covered service except for Part D, whether it's Medicaid or Medicare that would usually pay for it. So you automatically get that ALJ here, even if you didn't request it. And then if you lose that, you go to the Medicare Appeals Council. And if you lose at Medicare Appeals Council, then you can go to federal district court. Now, Part D is the one thing that's not integrated. So Part D appeals are handled completely separately through the existing Part D appeals process. That's the one thing that isn't included. And then here's a whole bunch of teeny tiny little links to things. Like MLTC, the most important document for FIDA is the three-way contract. Three-way contract because it's between the federal CMS and New York State Department of Health and then the FIDA plan. And as you can see, it is 347 fun-loving pages. So I don't recommend that you read this whole thing, but what we've started doing is creating a spreadsheet where we're trying to keep track of all the different provisions in the three-way contract so that you can try it sort of like a pathfinder for the three-way contract. So I will share this with everyone. So you could say, okay, I'm looking for something in the three-way contract that governs, let's say, the 90-day transition period. And then here we go. It's on 2.6.6.1, and this is a synopsis of, or an excerpt of that section, just to help you find your way around. 24-hour care, see, there you go. Or, so the three-way is pretty important. There's also this enrollment-disenrollment guidance, and there's a state-specific appendix to the enrollment-disenrollment guidance. So that those are some other important resources. And then FIDA is MRT 101. That's which of the MRT proposals FIDA is. So there's a page on the Department of Health website that has some more info about FIDA as well. So do you guys have any questions?
I guess my only real question is the providers, and you know, I guess this works really well when you have a robust selection of providers. So the providers will contract directly with the MLTC, like, well, not so much GuildNet because you can go out of network with them, but say North Shore MLTC or something like that. They contract with them and they become a FIDA provider?
Yes.
Is that how it works?
Yeah, so it works like any Medicare Advantage plan. The providers have to, the providers have to contact the plan to participate in that plan's network. And each plan is handling that separately. So if, for example, we've been getting calls from podiatrists who are eager to participate in the network of FIDA plans, and we can give them contact information for the provider liaisons at each of the different FIDA plans, but they just have to call each of them and make arrangements with them. And you know, the payment, the credentialing and rate process is completely independent from plan to plan. So one plan might pay a certain amount for a particular procedure, and another plan might pay a totally different amount. One plan might require prior authorization for something, the other plan might not. You know, one plan might say, well, we're only going to work with providers who have achieved a certain quality credentialing thing, and the other plan might not. Now, one thing that is not, separate from plan to plan is training. All of the plans are required to ensure that the providers in their network receive certain training about FIDA. And thankfully, through a huge amount of work by the plans and advocates, they are developing a single unified FIDA training for providers so that a provider need only take that one training, and that qualifies them to become a participating provider for any FIDA plan.
My only other question that I had was you were talking about getting your client to call and opt out of FIDA. For example, if they were getting their health services from United Healthcare provider or something who doesn't offer FIDA. Is there a way that we could, is there any form or anything that we could get from the client and we could make the call for them that they wish to opt out?
There isn't any form, and the way that opt-out or enrollments, for that matter, work is that either the client has to call, and they can call with someone else on the phone with them, which is what we've been doing a lot of. So we will have, if someone calls us, calls the hotline, and we counsel them about FIDA, and after hearing the pros and cons and going through their specific situation, they decide they don't want to enroll in FIDA and they want to opt out, then we will offer to call New York Medicaid Choice with them. And so
so that's where you get back to that three-way calls are very, very beneficial.
Right, we'll do the three-way call. They're also a pain in the neck because for some reason the quality of the call goes, it's the pits at that point. Nobody can hear each other. The client's got hearing impairments. There's, non-English speakers. I mean, these are crazy calls, but you try to do the three-way call, and, that way you can kind of back the client up a little bit while they're talking to New York Medicaid Choice and, can sort of help out on that. But that's assuming that the client really actually has capacity or the ability to communicate well enough on the phone that they can get through that call. Now, New York Medicaid Choice has interpreters in every language, so if the problem is that you have a client who doesn't speak English, that shouldn't be an obstacle. You should still be able to do it. But if the client, can't communicate on the phone at all or, has capacity issues, then you can have somebody else call. And what happens is, let's say it's the spouse or it's an adult child, and they call up New York Medicaid Choice and say, I want to opt out on behalf of my mother. They will ask you a bunch of questions about the person. They'll ask you like date of birth, Medicaid number, Social Security, address, all this stuff to verify that you are, in a trusted position. And then they will ask you, are you authorized to make medical decisions for your mother? And if the person says yes, then they will let that person opt out or do an enrollment.
Okay.
But if someone who isn't like a family member or friend, if it's like a provider or someone from a plan, or even probably one of us, if we call without the client and they say, they're not, I don't think they're going to let us say, oh yeah, I'm authorized to make medical decisions for this person. Because they're very worried about people fraudulently opting people out.
Right.
The state is very paranoid about that. So, and people have tried, and people do this, calling and saying they want to opt out like 10 people en masse. So, if there's a situation, this is an issue that has been on the top of our agenda since day one. If you have a situation where somebody really needs this as a reasonable accommodation, the person needs to be able to opt out in writing, or they can't do it by phone, they don't have anybody else, let me know. And we may be able to work those out on a case-by-case basis.
Okay.
All right, you've been a fantastic audience. I'm here every week.
I've heard more in 2 days than I could have ever imagined. You're very good at explaining very dense material. So
Thank you. We'll see how much of we'll see how much of it we retain, including
like
myself.
nothing.
Right. Well, you can
Send
always.
the slide.
Yeah, you have a lovely 84-page PowerPoint. You can always refer that. All right. Well, thank you so much, folks, and there will be more to come, including at our extravaganza in Albany in early May, and hopefully that will be a little bit less intense, and we'll break it up a little bit with some socializing and some fun things. So, looking forward to seeing you guys there.
Same here. Take care.
Too. Good night.